電機と天才トリップ・ホーキンスが世に送り出したマルチプレイヤーだ。
It's a new experience.
それは全く新しい体験。
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So, tearing out a fun episode for you guys this morning because we are kicking off our new series on Tuesdays, and I'm calling it The 3DO Doesn't Suck, and I'm here to convince you why. Because ever since I got a Panasonic FC1 back in the day on release, my father was very interested in it and he brought it home for the family to check out. I have been an absolute huge 3DO fan. Now, I'm sure the comments down below are going to be 3DO sucks. Go ahead and make those. It feeds the algorithm and we always appreciate that. I'm not here to tell you that this is going to stand toe-to-toe with PlayStation 1. I'm here to tell you that it is a fun console that if you just think sucks and haven't played yet, you are totally missing out on some awesome games, some of the earliest 3D stuff of the 90s. And I just love the Panasonic FC1 in and of itself. It's a monolithic slab of plastic and it is just such a fun console to take a look at. Now on the front, this is the original 3DO model. Yes, there's the Gold Star, yes, there's the FC10, the Sanyo Tri, as well as the LG models. But to me, when I think 3DO, I think the FC1. You get the 3DO logo there, real 3DO interactive multiplayer FC1, a ready and access light, one controller port which was a weird decision, as well as a power button and an open close button. But this is basically like a VCR meets a game console and it has such stylistic plastic molding. I've always loved this thing, but just be aware mine is ODE modded. I'll leave a link in the description below where to grab one, so my drive bay is empty. Now around the back you have an expansion port as well as a channel select for RF. Some later consoles are going to have a toggle to change the video modes, but mine is just channel 3 and 4. And I will say, as far as the video output is concerned, 3DO has the best S-video output of any console ever made as far as the FC1, although it is weird they decided to put that power cord permanently in there. Around the side we have the AV expansion slot. Now originally when the 3DO M2 was in development, the original plan was to have this be how you connected a 3DO M2 to your 3DO to have it be an upgrade path. The reason that never happened was the bus width was not compatible with the 3DO M2 hardware, so something like this Iron and Blood, which I'll be showing in 4K shortly, that does run on the 3DO M2, could have theoretically run through that expansion port had it not been bus limited. And that's the fun thing about the 3DO, it leads directly into my favorite unreleased console of all time, the 3DO M2. Obviously I'm a little bit of a 3DO fan. Now taking a look again at that little expansion port, it's unfortunate that nothing ever really got fundamentally used there. It would have been amazing to have the 3DO M2 as a real product, but it just didn't happen. Around the other side, you're just going to get a couple vents here to circulate some heat, but not really much to see. It's a very traditional console design with all sorts of weird design cues, like the ridges on the 4 pillars on the corners, that makes it both unique and familiar at the same time. And interestingly, as we go to the 3DO M2, the FZ21, you're going to see so much of the design language from the 3DO carry over into what would have been the 3DO M2. The ready and access designation icons on both the M2 as well as the FC1 being identical. You're also going to have the same controller port except mirrored twice because you have 2 ports and you're going to have open and power on the same side. You can totally tell the design language carried from one console generation to the other, even if the second console generation in the 3DO lifespan never actually saw release. At least you got a reset button because on the 3DO there is not one, you have to do it from the controller. Now speaking of the controller, this was very forward thinking and I actually love the 3DO controller. It doesn't have the best D-pad in the world, but it is functional and it should have shipped with a few more buttons, but honestly, in the hand it is a very comfortable controller and it has all of the different multimedia designations as well, because this is also meant just to play CDs in your home, not just be a video game console. And what I think was actually a very smart innovation for back in the day is the headphone jack on the controller with a headphone volume wheel. When I first started playing 3DO when I was a kid and I wanted to stay up late at night, that thing was a godsend. No one would catch me playing video games at 2 AM. The one big miss is the daisy chaining of the controls. Having to plug player 2 into player 1 was a very odd decision, but as far as how the controller feels in the hand, I really do love the 3DO controller as far as the Panasonic branded one is concerned. It's comfortable, it has enough weight without being too heavy, you have the headphone jack, it really is a very nice device. And of course with modern innovations you also have stuff like Fixel's Export ODE here. This will plug in externally to the expansion port on the back, and you can have all of that optical disc emulation without having to modify your actual console. I'll leave a link in the description below, and just so you know, I make no money off of those. Fixel is just who I would consider a friend. Now on the game side of things, there's a very unique and interesting library on the 3DO, and you have completely different formats as well. In North America, you got the long box, or in PAL and Japanese territories, you got a standard jewel case. I love collecting the long boxes, even though it's very difficult to find them in good shape because they were long cardboard pieces that needed to survive decades to be able to present on a table today. And if there is one game more than anything else I love on the 3DO, it has got to be Killing Time. I consider this to be one of the best first-person shooters ever made of its generation, and you will be watching a video on it soon. The frame rate may not be great, but everything else about the game is an 11 out of 10 in my opinion. But let's take a look at what's inside an actual long box, because again, this is my preferred format to collect 3DO in, and I've got a ton on the shelf, but I also have a ton of Japanese imports. And that's the fun thing about 3DO. It doesn't have the biggest library, but there's a lot of fun to be had, and for the most part the games are still air quotes reasonably priced. Some will definitely cost you a little bit more, but there's nothing outside of the realm of craziness if you just want to grab a few games. Now I do have 2 copies of Killing Time in one long box, and I'm sure you're wondering why, other than the fact that it is my favorite 3DO game of all time. That is because for some games there are variant releases. That's the original version with a red disc and black art on top. This is the mail-in bug fix version with a black disc logo here. This is exceedingly rare. This is almost impossible to find. You had to mail in your original disc back in the day to get a bug fix, and this is what they would send you back. I've had this in my collection for probably 20 years now. And I love all of the different paperwork you get in 3DO games. They were really trying to make it feel like a premium product, at least on the Studio 3DO side. And inside of Killing Time, you even get a map of the Conway estate, as well as some tips and tricks. Trying to find this all complete can be quite difficult, and this game at least has definitely jumped up there in price. But you can always get the Japanese version, Tose Sarete Yakata, and this was actually given to me by a member of the team that developed Killing Time. When the 3DO offices were closing after everything was sold, they basically let people take whatever they wanted in the library, and he sent me a sealed copy maybe 15 years ago because he knew I was a fan of the game. I actually have made friends with a lot of the ex-3DO staff, and I've chatted with a lot of them about the development process and the games. And over on the Japanese side, you are going to get full color manuals for most games as well. I would say that the artwork on this, being Killing Time, isn't as good in the Japanese variant as it is in the US release, but you do get that full color manual. You do get spine cards, which are always fun, and you'll see here they printed that hint map inside of the manual versus giving you an actual piece of paper. But you do get reg cards, and those are always fun as well. And I have definitely collected a lot of fun 3DO ephemera and memorabilia over the years for Killing Time. This is a flyer that was in a 3DO magazine back in the day advertising the game with the most ridiculous render of Metenicus Isle I've ever seen. I also have some of the original art that was hanging on the walls at 3DO offices, made by the artist that did the concept art for the game. I've had this probably for about 15 years as well, and I absolutely love it. I don't hang it on the wall, it just stays in a bookshelf because honestly I don't really display a lot of my gaming collection, 3DO or otherwise. And because I have been collecting for a long time as well, I do have some betas in my collection, and you can still find them out there for a relatively decent price if you know where to look. This is a pre-release, pre-retail version of Killing Time that comes on a CDR. I know I'm pushing the Killing Time angle a lot, but it's just one of those things. This is one of the first games that made me fall in love with the 3DO interactive multiplayer, and it is something that I like to focus collecting on, but I think I have pretty much everything out there that could possibly exist for Killing Time at this point in time. But if you like beta collecting, it is still relatively cheap on the 3DO side of things, and that's always fun to find something that's not too expensive. But if you do like collecting the Japanese versions, you have a nice version of Police Knots on here, and this is the first way I ever played this game. I printed out a translated guide from GameFAQs like 15-20 years ago, used my inkjet printer to print like 80 pages, and went along screen by screen in the game reading off the actual text. I would never do that again today. Obviously we have a translation for the game, but this was my first encounter with Police Knots as far as actually being playable, and there's a really funny memory with inside of this case. I have not opened this game up since I moved to Chicago over 12 years ago. I put paper towels in some of my game cases so the disc didn't come loose, and apparently it's been sitting there ever since, which actually kind of made me laugh. Now on the other side of things, you have something like D's Diner Director's Cut. This is a special edition version of D from Warp, and it is another one of my favorite 3DO games of all time. I just think this game is absolutely absolutely so intriguing and so unique. And when you get to a lot of the Japanese special editions for 3DO games, you get a lot of really strange and interesting stuff in the actual jewel cases. You'll see here you get both a postcard as well as a poster, and one of the weirdest manuals I've ever seen put to a game, but honestly with Kenji Eno, all of his manuals are strange in and of themselves. It has an extra disc with bonus material as well as one of the tracks from the 3DO M2 version of D2, because this was in development when the development of D2 on the M2 had started as well. So much so that if you take a look at this little advertisement registering card right here and you open it up, you're going to see it's talking about both the version of D that we're currently talking about as well as D2 for the M2 down at the bottom, and they're wondering if you're interested in actually buying that in the future. And that leads into a lot of the other stuff for 3DO I love. There's so many random Japanese catalogs and magazines you can get a hold of for basically almost $0 on Yahoo Auctions Japan. You'll see here the advertisement for that version of D as well as the 3DO version of D2, the original version that was supposed to be exactly like D before it went into a full 3D engine. And unfortunately, all of those files seem to be lost to time, but you never know, maybe one day I will find something extra that I can share with you guys. But getting stuff like this just kind of reminds me of it being the 90s. Obviously I was not in Japan in the 90s, I was in the US, but it was still a good time. And that's what's so much fun about collecting 3DO stuff. You get so many really interesting things in a lot of the cases, especially if you get warp games. One game actually comes with a condom. I would not trust it at this point in time. It's probably a little bit old, but if you have a child because you decided to do that, that would be a really interesting story and I'd love to hear it. But even these little posters here are just so fun and intriguing. But I will say the manual to D's Diner Director's Cut is the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and it is so prone to breaking. It is extremely hard to actually get one in good condition like I have here, because it accordions out and it's almost impossible to actually read the damn thing. This may be the worst design manual I've ever seen, even though I love it as a designed object. Even folding this thing back up after I shot this video, it took me about 4 minutes off camera to get everything to twist the exact right way, so I was actually able to put it away without damaging it whatsoever. And the nice part is there are new developments on the 3DO side as well. BioFury just recently came out, and it came out as a 1 of 100 limited edition long box. So there is more love on the 3DO front coming in 2023 and 2024. More people are discovering this hardware and just how much fun it is and just how good of a library it does have. There's definitely some bad games and a lot of them did get ported over to PC, but for the most part I just love the 3DO library. But that's the thing, there's a lot of different ways to play these games. Something like Killing Time got ported to PC and Macintosh, but it actually got remade as a completely different game with the same theming. So if you've ever played the PC or Mac version of Killing Time and you think it's not a great game, that is because it's actually not even the game you played on 3DO. But we're going to be talking about my favorite 3DO games for the next 9 to 10 weeks. We'll see how many episodes I end up making, but I will tell you right now, don't believe the internet when they tell you the 3DO sucks. Don't believe me when I tell you it's the best console of all time, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a lot to love on the 3DO, and if you just listen to people say it's the worst console of all time, you're going to miss out on some really fun games. And because emulation is great, you can play them today. Short of that, that's the FC1, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.